Hey, it's Joe Hoodzilla Alexander here today for Hood Talks. I want to touch on a subject that everybody's wanting me to talk about: men's mental health and what it means to me. So I'm here by myself because I feel like a lot of the men out there feel like they're by themselves. We have a lot that weigh in on us as men, and throughout the years, we were always taught that we have to suppress certain emotions or else you're truly not being a man. But throughout my years, I found that that could be self-destructive. Creating midlife crisis or menopause, as they may call it. And a lot of people say, "Oh, that's just because you're weak," and da 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 da. Well, not really. I kind of went through it, and now that I've been through it, I can kind of give some insight. It's hard to become. We'll just use me as an example right now. I was having a really good life. I was fighting, and I was on top of the world, and everything was going great. And when you're at the top, you start to lose sight of who you were, and I started to believe I was invincible, and the crew I was with would charge me up. Man, we were great. Everything was great. Our relationships there were great. Everything was good. And then I went through a few tragedies. First, one of my very, very good friends got into a car accident, caught on fire, burned to death. Then I had a really bad fight where it ultimately ended up injuring me. Five, six, and seven in my vertebrae in my neck and doing some damage to me. So I ended up having to quit my fighting career after a couple fights after that. But the whole reason I'm talking about this is it took a few things to create a mindset that created a downfall pattern that was never talked about, never reach out for the help. I struggled through it, a lot by myself. And I think this is where jujitsu and people around me, my faith in God, everything started to. So let me get through this. I was training hard. I was doing really good. I was fighting all the time. My buddy ends up in a accident, burns to death. That created a small disconnect because this guy was like my brother. We wrestled together. We did everything together. And when he passed, it was just really sudden, tragic, and it took a piece of me away. And that was only a part of it. So I kept fighting, and I ended up taking an injury. I took a fight with a guy who was, he's a tough guy, but I should have by far won it. I did. I made a mistake. The mistake ended up costing me, the fight and my neck, and ultimately my pride. So at that time, I was going through a lot of emotions, a lot of pain, but I couldn't just sit. I kept fighting. I hid the pain and the injuries, and I kept trying to push through to the next fight, and took a few more losses, which also started to create a little more disconnect. When the disconnect happened, it started to work into my relationships. Once relationships started to get rocky, things started to happen that weren't supposed to, and I started to have disconnect from home. And at that time, I was going through it really bad, and then my brother overdosed, and that was rock bottom. My disconnect of who I was so far that it took me to a spiral down, and I just had enough. I was at my brother's bed side, and he coded three times on me, and I was losing my mind. So I went out to the hallway and sat down and proceeded to hash it out with God. And at that time, there were so many variables already working in my life where I'd already allowed all this disconnect to create big problems in relationships. And I just was at total bottom. And I sat down and I prayed that day, and God had answered my prayers. And at that moment, I was so far gone, and I was with this team that I thought I was going to have a lot more support with. And ultimately, when I left there because I needed to, they felt as though I was leaving for another reason. So I feel as though there was a little of their own mental problem there because of my leaving. You're such a strong unit. and then one of you disconnect from that unit, it also creates a little mental anguish over here, and then so they verbally attacked me and said things in the beginning, and that created even more of a depression, because it was like ultimately I'd spent my whole life trying to fight, uh, put all my effort into it, marriage aside, kids aside, uh, and just totally went for it. And then when that's not there, what is left? Who are you? What's left? And I think that's where we need to do better. We have to understand the psyche of what created that. I was on a good roll. I walked out of prison. I made this the way, the way you think controls the way you act. You control the way you think, you're going to control the way you act. I teach this to everybody. And it's because it's ultimately the goal or the lesson that I had to learn in my life through all these tragedies, and how to actually use those and apply them in my life. And it's really hard because it takes faith too. I always say strengthen spirit, strengthen mind, strengthen body, strength for life. Your spirit has to be connected. If you're doing those things, then your mind will be connected, and then physically your body will do the things that you needed to do, and you'll live a long life. But to get back to where I was already at that deficit at that very bottom. My psyche had told me, "Hey, you were on cloud nine. You were up here. You had a team. They were supportive. All the love was there, dude. I was. There was no stopping the train we were on, and that was the emotion that you had. But then when that train derails, then what? Everybody keeps moving in that train, but that one part that got damaged, the one part of the train that got disconnected, it's no longer on there. It's you're not in the middle, you're not in the front, you're not the caboose. You're just not there. But it keeps moving, and you're watching it, and you're watching it, and you're watching it from afar. You start to become estranged. Then your mental breaks down. You become isolated. The people that you thought were your friends really what were there for an association, for to make themselves better, ultimately, is how you feel. Even though you've put hours and hours in, you think it's a brotherhood. Yes, you do grow bonds. Yes, you do have brotherhoods, but you start to slip that away when all that starts to be taken away, and you go into a mental deficit, and it becomes emotional, and then you start looking for a way out. Well, much like when I was coming out of prison, I had to find my own way out, and ultimately my lifestyle was an addiction. So I had to change it. The way you think controls the way you act. You control the way you think, you're going to control the way you act. So walking out, I was on a clean path. My mind was right. And then I hit that what they call the menopause or midlife crisis, where yeah, everything was working, everything was there, but it wasn't fully, it was just me trying to push through and make myself better. And ultimately, when my pride had fell, when everything else had that I thought was tangible, that I could reach, that it's right there, but then it's not there, it puts you in a different spot. And some people will never understand it because they got strong support groups. And even though I do, my wife is a very strong support group, and she's the one that helped me push through this and see through it with God, on our side as a braid. It took all three, but ultimately, it takes those things to compile most of the time, and they don't even have to be this major. I'm only using my life as an example because Phil Baroni is in the same thing, and I see the same thing in police officers. I see the same thing in fire department. I see the same thing when we think about the Weedify, all of our military out there. Once their service is done and they don't have the action, that's the difference. The endorphins, the testosterone, everything that goes into the fight or flight mentality, the survival mentality, that who we are as warriors. Once that's gone, and that service, that duty, that action, that endorphin is gone, and now you're sitting there and you got to think, now what? I'm used to going 100 miles an hour. I'm used to high stress, high volume all the time. And now what? you're benched. And thank God that I had a strong wife help me pull it out of there, and a great God, because I started, like I told you, when my brother coded 3 times. I sat down and made a prayer, and that prayer was answered. And when he answered that prayer, I made a whole change in my life. And God showed me that day. I said, if you're real, show me you're real. And he showed me several different ways. We'll go through that. That's a whole nother testimony. But he showed me tangible, like reach out and touch. And I changed my life. And listen, when I changed my life, doesn't mean that I became holier than thou, and I don't make mistakes. No, I just learned that there is a tangible God, and that God is real. And if you have faith and you do the things that He asked you to do, and you don't have to hit the mark every time, that He's there for you. But that's one way that I made it out, was my wife and faith in God, and God showing up and showing out for me over and over again. But it took me first to fall from the deficit, and that was first to recognize, that one, we're not alone. You're not alone. I'm right here talking about it. You're not alone. It's a mindset. And, if you're doing high activity and high volume things, and then it's taken away, that mind only has that opportunity to slow down and think. And that's when it becomes dangerous. And I thank God for jujitsu, because not only did it help me, one, find my identity, two, it gave me an avenue of outlet. It gave me people to talk to that are like-minded. It gave me a way of expressing even the violent side of myself. Yes, even my violent side. I learned to use it in an adaptable way to help other people. There are so many like-minded people out there like us that just don't understand how to use their energy. And what I like to tell people is, you don't have to get hit to get that fight and flight mentality. We can do it in a controlled environment. And right here at my academy is where I try to do these things. I'm only one that jujitsu has helped. There are billions of stories out there. But what I like to tell people is, it helped me to help you. And it doesn't have to be jujitsu. It just has to be time that we spend talking. Maybe there's something else that you're good at, that you can expose. There's several things in my life that I've done: guitars, all types of stuff. And if you know me, I'm jack of many trades, master of none. The only thing I will master is jujitsu. But that aside, I got many officers that come in here. I'm adopted cop. I'm weedify. I believe that, we have to stop and think about, when the officer leaves one call. Let's just take and this is just an example, and it happens worldwide. I watch SVU and all these crazy things. Let's just take an example of a family unit, a stepfather or a pedophilia type person in the scenario. Mother with 3 children. She's working her tail off. She's got 2 jobs. She's just trying to make it. And the kids have to be watched by whoever is available at the time. And maybe at that time, this person, his intent, it seems good. You really, but now the kids are being touched and things are happening, and the officer comes in because of this, and he has to deal with this child and deal with this mother. And then he leaves that call where he may have children at home, and he's seeing these scenarios because he's not there, and mom might have to work because of fine. I don't know. But he leaves that call and he goes to another call where maybe a mother has been beaten down by her husband and the child's over crying. And now we're into 2 emotional scenarios. Then you go straight from that to maybe an armed robbery. Now there's a guy out there who's shooting at you, another high stress. But there was never a decompress. There was never a decompress moment. There was never somebody to say, hey, man, I understand tonight's shift was really bad. Besides Jim Bontrager and the guys that he has working under him, I really do tip my hat for Elkhart County. Their chaplains are always at service to law enforcement day and night. and I love them for that. But uh, they're really some of those guys because of the mental health, the way that we are taught. Hey, you can't feel like that. You're gonna be a pussy. You can't do this, or else you're not a man. Don't be weak. Suck it up, Buttercup. What do you mean you feel that? Don't feel that. You can't be that. Harden up. So guys go home and they just start drinking to hide or mask all the bad that they have to see, and they don't want to tell their family. I mean, how do you go tell your family, yeah, I had to put my fingers in somebody's stomach because their guts were hanging out, or hey, I just went over here and this 2 year old was shot through the freaking eye and his brains were hanging out because of some stupid ass kid with a gun. Excuse my language, guys. These are things that I deal with in my academy with officers when they need to decompress. And these are the same situations that you guys need to be out there to help with that are owning academies and doing jiu-jitsu. You guys have a responsibility to help these people just as I do. In fact, all of society does. They were yelling, defund the police. No, man. You want to know why they're beating the shit out of us? It happened to my brother too. He was tased 14 times. It's all on documentation. That was the reason. He was being OD'd. They called the police. The police came up. They took it the wrong way. Why? Because they're used to dumbasses like this. They had to tase him 14 times and put him down, even though he was only 114 pounds. 6 of them stomped him, had baits on his. There's a whole thing on it. And there was a lot of forgiveness, and that's a whole nother thing that I can talk about. But I'm Adopt a Cop today because I understand the mental aptitude of what they have to deal with also. Plus the prayer that I made allowed my brother to live, and he came out with another story of his own. One day we can get into that. But right now we're talking about the mental health. What triggered that emotion to happen, even though we're to protect and serve? And that's what they're there to do. They didn't mean to make the mistake. What happens is they come there. This person is defiant. They've just left 3 other calls to where they're dealing with the same thing, except this guy had a knife and might have stabbed one of them. We never talk about that. That stuff's never on the news. We only want to talk about, oh, look what they did to us. But the first time we're shot, stabbed, robbed, the first 2 people you want to call are the first 2 as men were taught, oh, Jesus and the police. Oh, Jesus, somebody called the police. Now they're our friends. So, this is my point that, every day they go to these calls. They rush in for less money than we're making at our regular jobs. They're running in, sacrificing their lives. They're the ones that are taking out, the sex trades. They're the ones that are dealing with the high violent people. Notice around us, violence is getting higher and higher. Guns everywhere, people shooting, people stabbing. Our police are the ones that are out there trying to stop this. And at the same time, dealing with people like us that don't understand their mental aptitude. And that's what I'm trying to get at. We're taught to suppress it. So they suppress it just like we do. So it builds into an anger issue. It builds into alcoholism, and other things. So, one of the things that I really am trying to get at is we have to recognize these things. We have to offer better programs for people to get men's mental health. We have to make that awareness. We have to start showing. It's not going to help with my generation. It may not help with one generation below me. But if we start making it aware now, that my children's children, my grandchildren will have a chance to understand it's okay to talk about emotion. When you have that girlfriend at a young age and you break up, it's okay to come to dad or mom and say, I really felt bad about this, so we can work it out, so that we understand how real relationships work, and how things cohesively work together, as a family unit, as society, to be able to see these things, to see the marks and talk about it. Don't be quiet, speak up. That's what they used to do. Back in the day when a neighbor had a problem, the other neighbor helped out. You didn't have sugar, we came together, ghetto water, baby. You know what I'm saying? You didn't have bread, I had bread, you have peanut butter, we had a sandwich. That if you had a problem, it was, what's up, man? Let's talk. Oh man, what? No, no, it's always told, oh, suppress it. You're a boy, suck it up. No, man. Let's talk about it. Let's work through those emotions. Everybody has them. Doesn't make you weak. Okay? Doesn't make you weak. I can talk about my emotions and still knock your teeth out. You know, the people like Phil Baroni, he wasn't weak, but he felt weak. He had something that triggered him already. He was already off the rail before he went there. But people saw the signs, didn't speak, and if they did, they didn't do it in the right way. You know, when I was going through it, another friend of mine, Rico Robinson, was going through his own thing, and everybody, that's his story to tell. But when the rails were falling off, his rails were falling off, and that's what created where we're at now. We came together. We used what we knew to help each other work through it with God and my wife. You know, my wife was pushing me to get to church and pushing me in the right directions and telling me that I was better than what I was feeling at that time. And you know, my kids were seeing things at home. I didn't want to hear her advice. I didn't want to feel it because I was so I felt so bad for myself, and I was so angry that I just felt worthless. You know, and when you get to that feeling, you revert back to an old you. That old muck comes up and starts to bubble back into your life. And you know, once I actually made that prayer and I did the right things, you know, that muck started to go away, and I started to uncover it. And that's where I came with the realization of, you know, the men's mental health. I know a lot of people say, oh, that's for pussies. Well, let me tell you something. A pussy is tough. It has children. It flops right back into shape. Dicks are soft. You get kicked in, you cry. So pay attention to that. You know, having emotion doesn't make us weak. Does not make us weak. I watch soldiers cry. I watch freaking mothers cry. I watch some of the biggest gangsters in the world fucking cry. Okay. So once you guys soften up and realize this and start showing it to our children, we're going to have less of this chaotic bullshit where they think they got to run around and be tougher than what they are and do all these things. That's what creates that hardened shell. We got to break this shell to plant the seed. There are answers. There are people out there for you. The way you think controls the way you act. Understand that. You know, it's one of the hardest lessons that you can learn. But if I were to have allowed everybody in my life to win, you'll never do this, you'll never do that, you'll never, you wouldn't see me here 23, 24 years after prison. You know, I walked out that day and I said, I'm never going back. And I didn't. I changed my addicting personality into something else. Yes, I may have missed the mark on the way a few times, but I'd never stop pressing forward. And I learned that, you know, if I keep making the changes, you know, I keep doing that, and every day I have to change. That's the evolution of who we are. As we hit, there's a time period of our life, a season that changes, and that's where it starts to disconnect. You start to become older. Things start to leave you. Your children start to move out of the homes. You know, you start to feel disconnected there. There's empty nest syndromes. There's many of these. But what I want to tell you is I can help you with some of the answers. There's some of you out there that feel disconnected. There is a home. Jiu-jitsu gave me a home, gave me a whole identity. It re-sparked the life for me. My whole academy, you know, everything that we do in here. I have a family, even though it isn't blood. I have a family that's here. You know, they reach out with one another, they network, we work together. You know, the only thing that we can do is try to make our generations after us better than we are. The only thing we can do is equip them with the tools that are necessary. It's up to us to recognize our folly, correct that folly, and then move forward. That's what we have to do. We can make our whole country a better place. We can make what we had. You know, people talk shit, but the 90s were great because no matter who you were, where you came from, I came from some of the nastiest streets. And you know what? We came together every time and made a difference in our lives with one another. And that's what we have to do again, man. We have to go back to that. We have to unite. We have to get the answers for these kids, and mainly the boys. If you pay attention, men at my age right now we're the biggest statistic of suicide out there. We have the biggest suicide rate. How do we stop that? We got to learn that high activity, high volume lifestyle has something, and we got to learn to utilize it before it starts to just come to a stop like it did with me. We have to give them answers, provide them the places to come in, and work through it. Not only be a physical trainer, but also a mental trainer. I come in, I take a lot of their stuff in, I help them work through it because I have life experience, and time on the mat also does that. It gives them a place where they could come in and let out all the anger and all their energy, and do the things that help them to break down their psyche. I mean, when you start doing physical therapies like this, you start to learn how serotonin of the brain and how everything works together, and then you get better health. Then your diet and nutrition. There's a million things that we could talk about on this platform about the men's mental health, but the main thing is recognizing it first. Recognizing it first. Start with the generation below us, like I do my son. I'm always telling him, Joe, let your emotions out. He still bottles them because he still sees it. But if I can break through and get that little bit now before it's too late, then he isn't that hardened guy that, when things happen, he thinks it's the end of the world. As men, we got a lot on us. We really do. I mean, just even somebody that doesn't live a high stress life could still be in high stress right now. RV workers all over the United States right now are on a shutdown for a month, 2 months. You're worried about making the electric bill, the gas bill, paying for the car, kids got school. I mean, school bills are $100 just for that. I mean, yeah, we got taxes coming, and yeah, some of us put a little squirrel nut back, but you got mortgage, you got food, you got gas money, you got all these expenditures, and it starts to weigh on us. But what we have to remember is we got to live life day by day, and we have to look at the resources that are available, and we have to be thankful for the things that we do have. Okay, some of our styles may change, but mine changed, and then it got better, and that's what I'm trying to tell you. It's not over. There are people out there that can help you. There are resources out there. If you need help finding resources, contact me. Alexander Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I'm right on Main Street. Everybody knows that. We have resources. If you need mental health, domestic violence, all that. I just want you all to know that there are people out there that genuinely care, that have been through life struggles like myself. Especially you men. Listen, been to prison, been stabbed, fought all my fucking life. I was the toughest of the toughest. Blah 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 blah. Let it all go, man. I'm telling you right now, let it all go. You can still be that guy. Pringles all come in the same can, cut all the same, packaged the same. Everything's the same, but the flavor. It's just what flavor do you want? And that's what I'm trying to explain to you right now. There are people out there. I'm here. There's other academies out there. There's other resources. If you need help, here I am. I am willing to help you. Just come and see me. I thank you for your guys' time. I could go on about this forever. Let's just keep in mind, that there's military out there, vets that are homeless, and it's because of their mental. Who's really looking after them? Sometimes our government gets backed up, but who's going back to double check to see that guy that came home, that might not even have family, that served for you? Now we need to serve for them. There are outlets out there, guys that come home that have 80% mental capacity to where you're like, oh, I got PTS, I can't work, come see me. I have a program for you, We Defy. Okay, let's get you in a gi. Let's start to put some of them endorphins back in you. Let's start helping. Ladies at home, you're the same. Working all day, ain't got nothing, kids are this, la, la, la. We got programs for you. Saturdays, I got programs for you, women only. Police officers, adopt a cop. Yeah, I know, I was a felon. I did all these things. Who better to be on your team than somebody that recognizes the same psychologies as what I once was? It was 30 years ago. I'm a whole different man. Now I'm a professor. Jiu-jitsu helped me. It will help you too. Come see me. All right, guys. Much love to all of you out there. Once again, Joe Hoodzilla Alexander from Alexander Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy today with Hood Talks. Keep it real.